Hello, welcome to Artificial Insights, where we interview product leaders and thinkers in AI about what it means to do AI right. I am not Daniel, Daniel's AI voice double. Daniel usually hosts this podcast himself. Today, he does not. Officially, this is because he has a cold. Unofficially, his editor wife decided the year should still end on time. So here I am. This special bonus episode is a synthesis, not a highlight reel. Over the past year, across dozens of conversations, a pattern kept surfacing. Not always directly, often unintentionally. Builders kept circling it. Executives did too. So did philosophers and operators. Something about work has started to flip, not disappear, not vanish. Flip. Humans are no longer primarily the ones executing the work. They are becoming the ones who enable it, guide it, and judge it. This episode walks through that shift. If you have felt excited, uneasy, or quietly tired trying to keep up with AI this year, this episode is meant to help you step back. What changed? Throughout the year, something became clear in the conversations with builders. AI does not just make work faster. It changes who the work is for. Chingiz Jumanazarov articulated this clearly.
The fundamental idea of how work is done is changing. The work in support world was all about human doing the real work, doing tickets. And the whole ecosystem of tools emerged as a result of this fundamental idea. And I'll give you examples. So ticketing platforms came up because help desk, right? Okay, we need to enable human to receive a ticket, read a ticket, understand what's going on, go resolve the problem and respond back. There are some, of course, it's more complex than that, but high level, that's what ticketing platforms do, enabling humans to resolve issues. Then workforce management tools came up and they were like, okay, we need to now schedule these human agents. We need to enable them to be scheduled across the time zones and shifts, depending on your seasonality, depending on the busyness of your support or operations. Then there's another tooling, which is QA software. Okay, now we need to check the quality of these human support agents, how they're responding to customers, right? Then there's knowledge management platforms, Guru, Asam, I think it was like Confluence, some others, where they're enabling humans to retrieve knowledge from systems and find the knowledge faster to respond to customers. So if you think about in a BPO industry, right? BPO industry by itself is just providing this human workforce. And it was all around this idea that humans is the atomic unit of work. And then there are all these tools. And then now we're seeing this in real world is that AI agents can do this work for humans, which kind of raises this big question: what's going to happen, right? And no one knows what's going to happen, but I feel like that's the world we're living in. And Codif is one of the companies which is, inventing this kind of future. We're like building this future where agentic AI can do the work.
When the tool becomes the primary actor, the human role moves upstream. Direction still matters. Judgment still matters. Execution no longer defines value. Others described what that felt like in practice. Bijan Vyas talked about relief when AI absorbed the repetitive loops, document checking, data entry, administrative grind. The reaction surprised him.
And I think that's the reality of what AI is doing. I can't say merchandising work is going to get completely automated. All you have to do is hit a button. It's a wrong message to send out. And I think it's conflating and causing issues in the market of what is actually possible with AI. Because the reality is when you get deep enough into the work that actually needs to be done, you realize that it's the creative, the strategic human elements that result in good sales, a good product, a good piece of writing. That is still very human. And the things that we relate to and that we will respond to in the market is to a human output that is relevant of what's happening in society and relevant to what's happening in culture at any given time. And so you can't rely on AI to do that for you, but all the legwork leading up to it, yeah, that can be automated. Let's get the 90% of the grunt work done, and let's allow the human to do the 10% that, is the reason why they're doing the work that they're doing.
Mm. What have you heard from the people doing that 10% that now use your products? Do they love it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because in the beginning, it was certainly those conversations of a little bit of angst of, is this what's going to happen if I use this tool? Am I going to lose my job? And we got into general availability last week, actually, with our product. So we did a full set of new demos again now, and we're handing the product actually over to those customers. And that same individuals were like bright smiles. Oh my God, I don't have to do this anymore. This is amazing. Now I can actually do the work that I want to do. And I think that was a really cool reaction to see once we actually gave the product to them to say, hey, like your job is actually more important than ever because you have a specialty, you have a skill set, and now you get to practice your skill set. You don't have to do grunt work anymore. It's all creative output now.
People did not feel replaced. They felt freed. Mike Kirkup used a metaphor that stuck.
We've met some customers who have a team of people who just review bank statements and analyze them and, those types of things. And so when we have conversations with them, it's not about replacing the job. Again, it's more, oh my gosh, like we could take those 3 people who literally just review bank statements all day and we could go put them on this team where they can add more value and they can do other stuff. And to me, I have yet to see okay, well, this is going to take somebody's job. Right now, it really is much more like a suit of armor or an exoskeleton or that kind of analogy than it is just purely throwing a robot into the field.
Execution stopped being scarce. Direction did not. Ahmad Iqbal extended the idea further.
I'll take my 5-year-old son as an example, right? He's starting to get into drawing and things, but he doesn't have the fine motor skills to actually get out exactly what he's thinking. Like he's trying to draw like Leonardo the Ninja Turtle, but it doesn't look anything like Leonardo the Ninja Turtle, right? Because he just doesn't have the fine motor skills. And even when he's trying to describe something, he may not have the vocabulary to tell the story that he's trying to tell. So a lot of ums and ahs, and the way that the story is structured also kind of doesn't make sense in what he's talking about. But imagine that there could be some kind of an AI layer in this kind of creative tool where regardless of your fine motor skills or regardless of your vocabulary, you're still able to get that story, that video, that short movie that you're trying to make and have it be exactly what you were thinking, right? So that I think is like really magical. And that's what I think AI is going to enable and how we at Canva are thinking about the future of AI within our space, within our creativity and design space.
When the competency barrier drops, participation expands. Creation becomes accessible. Execution stops being the bottleneck. What it costs. This shift came with unease. Season 3 slowed the conversations down. Intentionally. The concern was not efficiency, it was agency. Dr. K framed this as the wisdom gap, the distance between what our tools can do and our ability to live with the consequences.
So when you have advancements, and wasn't always this way. If you think about specialized areas, right? So if it's medicine, think about how all the specialties in medicine, whenever they did research, it's like they couldn't even read each other's papers because it's so highly specialized. But now when you have general purpose technology that is intelligence, when you have scaling up or advancements in one field, so like we're having it in computer science or with artificial intelligence, you can see how that's impacting robotics and also education and healthcare because AI is intelligence. It's embedded in every system and it's general purpose. So, in other words, if you think about the Tower of Babel when there was one language. So now we're getting to this sense where we have a synthetic now Tower of Babel where the one language is code. Because this code now that's generalized and you don't even have to have a software engineering degree anymore, right? So all of that, what that means is that we do have this language kind of across all industries now. And everything's scaling up at once. And what's happening is, whereas when you think about the technology and you think about AI, the more compute they get, the more advanced they become. But think about it from a human standpoint. The more input that we're getting, the more information, the harder it is for us to take it in. And so we diminish. It gets more complex. And because of that complexity, our response diminishes. And that's where it comes into the wisdom gap because of that gap. So the question is, what's in that gap and how can we begin to close that gap?
Agency rarely disappears all at once. It thins. Quietly, Dr. Christopher Watkin approached the same risk from another direction. Friction, he argued, is not a flaw in human life. It is how formation happens. Remove resistance entirely, and becoming collapses into consumption.
For the vast majority of human history, the problem has always been, how can I get enough calories to keep me alive? There's one danger, and that is insufficient calories. Recently, in a very inconvenient way in terms of how we're wired, we've got a second problem, which is that it's now possible to have too many calories, to do damage to ourselves in that way. That's never been an issue for thousands of years. And then suddenly we're faced with two problems. I can have too little still, or I can have too much. And it's a similar issue, I think, with work. So it's always been, how can I get more done? How can I be more efficient? Suddenly, we're faced with the prospect of infinite efficiency. I can get everything done with no effort. That's like saying I can have as many calories as I can physically consume within my budget. That's not an issue. But the problem is that brings a second problem alongside the first one. It's how many calories are too many? How much efficiency is not good for me? Like that, if you'd have asked someone to that in the 19th, 1870s, that's a crazy question. Like we want all the efficiency we can get. But now with the prospect of a utterly frictionless productivity, we're forced to ask the new question, oh, hold on, how much friction is actually good for me? Because I can eliminate it almost completely now. Like, how much effort for the student is it important to put into an essay in order to end up with a really good essay, when you can end up with a brilliant essay with no effort at all? And so we're having to inch ourselves into a very new world where we're thinking, how much stress and difficulty and grind and grunt and process is it important for me to have in order to be formed into the sort of person who, fill in the gap, the sort of person who can receive that phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning and know immediately how to respond to it, because that sort of thing happens. The sort of person who can come home and my child throws all sorts of problems at me and I know what it is. Like, we can't always run to AI. So we have to be the sort of people who can do stuff. How much friction do I need in my life in order to be the sort of person who can do it?
Jennifer Moss brought this into the workplace.
Gallup data and this Microsoft Trends report that they partnered with LinkedIn to really uncover how people are feeling. And 1 in 2 workers globally are expressing a sense of AI anxiety. And they had a very robust data set. And what I think is most interesting that Gallup found is that it is in our younger cohort more than it has been before, because obsolescence used to really be around automation and being forced out through the new robots that were coming into warehouses, and sectors weren't feeling as fear of obsolescence as maybe others like manufacturing, but now it's pervasive. And that has a lot to do with AI. And what happens when you feel a sense of obsolescence, it reduces your hopefulness. So you don't see yourself in the future of that organization. It makes you less loyal because you don't feel like you're necessarily being cared for. And it can be a very subconscious feeling. But if you're uncertain about what your future looks like and no one's telling you that you're safe or that you're going to even be skilled up to be part of the organization, whether AI or not is going to take over a certain aspect of your role, all of these things make people tune out, they disengage, which is why we're seeing the highest level of active disengagement that we've seen in 10 years.
Fear of obsolescence does not usually show up as panic. It shows up as withdrawal. When people cannot imagine a future version of themselves that matters, they stop investing in the present. This is the central risk of the flip, not job loss, but the loss of meaning. What it requires. Later in the year, the conversations shifted again. The question was no longer whether to use the tools, it was how. Alex Meyer described a posture that kept coming up.
Learning is going to aid the next realm of art. You're just going to see so much happen around creativity. Again, everyone's got their kid eyes on for the first time in a long time, in a long time. I can't think of the last thing that sparked this much creativity out of everybody.
Kid eyes. Curiosity before cynicism. Exploration before optimization. When humans orchestrate instead of execute, something else happens. Previously impossible problems collapse. Josh Muller showed what that looks like in practice.
Back in the day, our curriculum took about 6 months just of audio editing to be able to ship, let alone all the extra stuff like translation and recording and everything else that happened. And I kind of just had this realization one day that if we could figure out where verses start and end, we could actually basically automatically do all that editing. We could use, there's this tool called FFmpeg. We could write these crazy FFmpeg scripts that would stitch everything together at once. I threw together a prototype of it, manually setting those timestamps myself. And then we tried it out, and basically in 10 minutes of compute time was able to do something that would have otherwise taken about a month of audio editing. And then we learned about this technique within AI that basically you can give a text and an audio to a model, and it will spit out those timestamps. And so that was the last piece we needed to like automate that process as much as possible. And now literally like that 6 months happens in about 16 minutes of compute time on my server. And so, yeah, it meant that we didn't need volunteers to do that work for 6 months. And now that's 6 months extra of a disciple maker's life that they can go and actually make disciples.
Human effort moves upstream toward creativity, toward discernment, toward responsibility. Responsibility for deciding when to trust the system, when to slow it down, when to override it, when to slow it down. That sentence sounds strange to hear, but it kept proving true. Chingiz grounded this historically.
When electricity came up, I think everyone was like so scared, like, oh man, it's going to replace so many jobs. Coals and everything will be shut down. But then no one predicted that, for example, electricity will enable television. Television will enable so many shows. And then there'll be actors who will be getting paid on television for that, right? So, I mean, these are like, I mean, could someone imagine when electricity was coming up, oh, there'll be a moment in time when there'll be this black boxes, there'll be like shows, and then the people will become like billionaires and millionaires because they'll be acting, and like it's kind of crazy. And I think the same thing I think about AI too, like it's, of course, now it looks scary, like for many people, and I understand it. But I think we will find what's going to be like behind the corner. And it's going to be hopefully better for humanity.
General purpose technologies do not promise outcomes. They make them possible. AI will likely do the same. One thought from this year matters more than most.
It's not a matter of whether this is an ethical framework, right or wrong. It's, do we want to do what is right, or do we want to do what is easy? And that's the tyranny. We end up wanting to default to what is easy. And if we're not mindful with this sort of partnership, we're going to find ourselves wishing that AI was not what it is today, right?
That question sits underneath many of the AI decisions being made right now. Patrick Beliveau added a reassurance worth repeating.
And you haven't missed the boat. Like anybody, again, people are very good at making excuses in their heads. You have not missed the boat. In fact, you're probably still early. Like maybe not literally, but figuratively in the grand scheme of it, AI is not very old and AI is not going anywhere.
Early enough to choose deliberately. The conclusion from this year is simple. Stop asking how AI replaces work. Start asking how it reshapes responsibility. Execution is cheap now, wisdom is not. And that may be the most human role left. This has been Artificial Insights, read by Not Daniel.
I made this podcast because I want to be the person at the city gate to talk to every person coming in and out, doing great things with AI, and find out what and why, and then share the learnings with everyone else. It would mean a lot if you could share the episode with someone that you think would like it. And if you know someone who would be a great person for me to talk to, let me know. Please reach out to me at Daniel Maneri on LinkedIn, or shoot an email to daniel@maneri.house, which is daniel@manary.haus. Thanks for listening.